And we are live. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to A Bookish Moment. I'm Sarah Burr.
And I am JC Kenney, and we've got a fabulous friend of the show hanging out with us for a second time. So, Sarah, I think it's time to get bookish.
Yes, I think our audience members will remember the really cool and really informative session that we first had with the wonderful Erica Miner when she was here celebrating the release of her Julia Kogan Opera Mysteries. Erica is an incredibly accomplished violinist who is now taken to writing murder mysteries about a violinist who first started with the Met Opera. And we are excited to be able to follow Julia around the country on her adventures and find out what happens to her in the third installment, Overture to Murder, which we will be chatting about today. Erica, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, JC. It's always a pleasure. I'm really excited about today's session and talking to everybody about Overture to Murder in the San Francisco Opera.
Nice. We had been chatting about this before we went live, but just the sites that we get to see as part of this series as a whole, because, we started in New York, then we went to Santa Fe in book 2, and now we're in San Francisco seeing all of these amazing sites and historic monuments and buildings and all of this good stuff. But also we're taking this big leap in time, which I just thought was the coolest thing as a creator, that you're kind of taking this jump into the future with Julia. So I'm wondering, Erica, if you wouldn't mind kind of setting things up for our audience members where Julia is at the start of Overture to Murder.
Well, at the beginning of Overture to Murder, it's 5 years after the ending of the previous book, Prelude to Murder. And there was a kind of shocking discovery at the end of that book. And 5 years later, voila, Julia is the mother of a 5-year-old daughter, but not just any daughter. This kid is like a genius kid, brilliant. She plays the violin, she writes poetry, she writes music, and more. So I had so much fun creating this character. And of course, Julia is teaching this little Rebecca to play the violin, which is a very volatile situation. And I write that from my experience because when I was a kid, not quite that young, but my father taught me the violin.
Oh, wow.
So I know what it's like and what a loaded situation it is for a parent to teach their kid the violin. And so in the beginning of the book, after the prologue, which is, in itself a pretty shocking kind of foreshadowing of what's going to happen, after the prologue, we see Julia and Rebecca in one of their violin lessons. And Rebecca, right off the bat, is just like Julia, rebellious, smart, talented, thinks she knows everything kind of thing. And Julia is beginning to question about whether it was the right thing to actually teach her daughter the violin. So it's a lot of fun right out the gate. And Rebecca shows just what kind of character she is. So I had a lot of fun writing that.
That's such a fun dynamic.
Yeah, and especially as a parent. And I tried to teach my kids various sports. I didn't have nearly the investment that, teaching a kid a musical instrument was. So I feel for all of you folks who have done that.
We also, I was thinking myself, it's like, wow, that we have a running joke in my family that, my dad can teach anybody anything except my mom and I. And so I just can't imagine that dynamic and being able to go through that. But that's such Rebecca has such a cool backstory personality, especially for a child in a traditional mystery. So I can't wait to dive into that a little bit more, Erica. But first, we have our wonderful audience members chiming in. We've got a good afternoon from Mizan, Farmhouse Reader and DHB both saying hello to everybody. Sawdust saying happy Tuesday, and David Plank saying checking in from New Hampshire. So welcome, folks. Thanks so much for being here for our discussion today. We're going to be delving into the world of opera, this time in San Francisco. And Erica, what made you decide to have the to set Overture to Murder in San Francisco when we have so many options across the world, the nation, for an opera house mystery?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I did have a lot of options, but there are a number of reasons. One, that I have a personal connection to San Francisco Opera over the years. A number of my friends and relatives have worked at San Francisco Opera, and I've spent a lot of time there over the last several decades. So I have a closeness, a close feel to the opera company. And also, honestly, San Francisco is such an opera town. I mean, this is a city that considers its opera only slightly less sacred than the Holy Grail. And I'm not exaggerating. That's absolute honest truth. And so in a city like that, where everybody knows, pretty much everybody knows the opera, or at least something about the opera, it was just, I couldn't resist it. I thought, what a great way to send Julia on her new adventure, and also a great city with that background of all those iconic landmarks for her and her daughter to discover it all together, in and with the opera and outside of the opera. So it was such a rich environment all the way around. I just couldn't resist. And so there we are in San Francisco, not to mention the history of the city. The opera has its own connection to even the gold rush, all of these things that I discovered when I did my research, that I'm happy to talk about if anyone wants to ask. But yeah, so those are the most compelling reasons why I decided to set this Overture to Murder in San Francisco at the San Francisco Opera.
So, and that just kind of tees up something that I had a question about, is the fact that not only is this in terms of the series, a new location, a new city, San Francisco, Julia has kind of a new gig. She's concertmaster. Could you talk about, how this kind of new role for her fits into the broader mystery? Because it's, when you think concertmaster, that sounds like, okay, somebody's in charge. So, so how does that, how is she dealing with this change?
That's an excellent way to put it. Thank you. In charge. That's what a concertmaster does. Officially, the concertmaster is the first of the first violinists. When you look at an orchestra, the very first chair closest to the conductor, that's the concertmaster. But the concertmaster has a lot more responsibility than just to the first violins. The concertmaster is responsible basically for the whole orchestra. The orchestra looks to the concertmaster for leadership, especially in the opera, when the conductor can be in some ways preoccupied with what's going on stage. The conductor then depends on the concertmaster to take charge, as you say, and lead. And when you're concertmaster, you're leading with your body, even as you play, to make sure the orchestra has someone to look to in case, God forbid, something should go wrong. If there's, these things happen in the opera because it's all live. There are train wrecks on stage that can happen. And if the conductor is like, okay, I have to take care of this, then it's the concertmaster who takes over and leads everybody. So for Julia, this is a highly stressful situation because she has to prove herself. She has to prove herself capable at a still very young age of stepping into that role. And the other bit of the controversy is that she's filling in for the usual concertmaster, who has been seriously injured in a hit and run accident, which Julia immediately suspects is not accidental. So there's another loaded situation. She has a situation teaching her daughter the violin, and she has a situation of proving herself in the orchestra of the second most prestigious opera house in the United States, which San Francisco is. So yeah, she has to prove that she can be in charge, and it's not an easy task.
I can't imagine having to, number one, perform in front of a live audience, but also then have this added pressure of kind of being in charge of this huge orchestra, and having to be so aware of not only yourself and your music, but just of everybody else. So it really paints a picture of, I think, Julia's capableness, and why she makes for such a stellar sleuth. And just another side note, we have Donna saying hello from Connecticut. And I think all of this talk with places that we've mentioned, I'm very curious for both our audience members and perhaps for JC and Erica. Have you been to an opera house before? And if so, do you have a favorite opera house that you visited, or perhaps like a favorite city where the opera house was that you visited? I'm really curious, because for me, I was in Barcelona, where we went to, it was a very small opera house, but it's where I saw Carmen. And Erica, I know that Carmen is on your starter list for operas that folks should see if they haven't been to the opera before. So when I learned that the first time, I was like, yes, I did it right. I went to see the right one.
Well, not only that, but seeing Carmen, which takes place in Spain, in Spain. I mean, you get double points for that.
But it wasn't in Spanish. It was,
No.
was it Italian, I think.
It's written in French. So
French. That's right. Okay. Yes, it was. Yes. So that I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like we're in Spain and takes place in Spain, but yet they're speaking French.
Well, yes. And it's interesting because French, Italian, and German are the three languages in which most operas are written. So very, very few. I can't even think of any operas in Spanish except for a special thing called zarzuela, which is kind of like a Spanish operetta kind of thing. But yeah, so those are the most common languages for opera, and that's one of the reasons why at the beginning of each chapter, when I always place an opera quote from a different opera in a different language, but I always then follow it directly with the English translation. But yeah, if you see opera in another country, since opera was born in Europe, specifically Italy, that seems like the most appropriate thing to do. I love that idea.
Well, I tell you what, and Farmhouse Reader is chiming in saying that their favorite opera house is the Camden Opera House in Maine.
I actually know that. I know that opera house.
Well, how about that? That's pretty cool. Well, the closest I can come is the Who's rock opera Tommy. So I don't think that really counts for this conversation. So, I'm just going to slink off and go back to my Philistine lifestyle. But one of the things that I want to ask Erica is, I loved at the beginning of the book, you have some quotes, some blurbs from author friends who are talking about the book. And this quote really caught my attention, that this is, quote, the most murderous opera in San Francisco history, unquote. And that as a mystery fan and a whodunit fan, that completely had me hooked right there. Would you care to maybe tell us a little bit why you think somebody would call Overture to Murder the most murderous opera in San Francisco history?
Well, I'm very flattered at the comparison. I think, that's exactly what I'm trying to accomplish here. And when you think about it, one of the reasons that these opera mysteries are so compelling is that opera stories are among the bloodiest, most violent ever written. So you have these operas taking place on stage, which are very violent, and the ones in this book from Wagner's Ring of the Nibelungen, this four operatic cycle, each one of these operas has at least one murder in it, if not more. So I think that it all combines to make, to really up the ante on this particular book, which is what I wanted to do, each one, with each one successively. So I love that idea, the most murderous opera of all. I love to talk about that, and I had so much fun thinking about, okay, in all of these books, which opera is going to take place on stage, which will be a background for the murders that take place elsewhere. And this all adds to, on the subject of Julia and her stress. Just think about, she's a mom. She's trying to take care of her daughter. She has a high pressure job that's enormously even more stressful than the one that she's had previously. And then the murders start happening. So then she gets all entangled in the murders. So it's just constantly upping the ante on the conflict and the stress and the mystery. So yeah, I mean, San Francisco, you can take a haunted San Francisco ghost tour. Do you know about that? Where you can go to these kind of out of the way places and back alleys and mysterious kinds of atmosphere in the city and find out, the history of the shocking murders and deaths and assassinations, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, San Francisco is really much more than meets the eye when it comes to mystery.
I did one of those tours in New Orleans, and it was so cool, but also very terrifying at the same time. And we went, I think we did the tour like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was still light outside, and we were still getting chills. It's like, we're really glad we didn't do this at night, or it would have been too scary. We have another viewer, David, saying that the Glimmerglass Opera House in Cooperstown, New York, is a favorite that they've been to. I love that name, Glimmerglass. Ooh, that sounds beautiful. I would love to know, Erica, because you kind of hinted to it. How much research into the operas themselves do you have to do, or maybe it's not research, might not be the right word, but how do you know when that this is going to be the opera that is going to be featured? What kind of elements really have to check all the boxes for you?
Well, after 21 years playing the violin in the Met Orchestra, I learned these operas inside out. Mm-hmm. I knew them all very well. I still do because I do lectures about them. So for the lectures that I do, I have to do a lot of research because then I bring in the background of the composers and the history of the times in which they were written. But as far as how do I decide which ones to use as the background for the mysteries, that's one of the most fun things because, as I said, opera stories tend to be bloody and violent. And it's just, I'm thinking about what's going to happen in this book and which opera will be the perfect background for it. It's a violent story, but they're all very different. There are murders in some of them. There are torture in others of them. I mean, it's kind of an endlessly wonderful source for stories. So I remember in Aria for Murder, that was obvious. I needed an assassination to take place with something that was going on stage. And I thought, okay, which are the operas that have assassinations in them? And so forth. So the special kinds of murders in the case of Wagner's Ring, which, by the way, has a lot of parallels to J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, because they have certain universal themes of love and jealousy and power in common. But this was, Wagner wrote all of the words for all of these operas, which can add up to as much as 20 hours of the music overall, which is pretty astonishing to think about. And he thought about great ways, even though the characters are mythological characters, the themes are the same. Power struggles have always been the same. And so when you've got a power struggle, right off the bat, someone's going to want to kill someone, and then it takes off from there. So yeah, it's not a problem to find operas that have the perfect violent background for the kind of stories that I'm writing.
Sign me up for a Lord of the Rings opera.
Yeah. So, I guess kind of that leads to another question, Erica, in terms of craft. Just to make sure I understand, it sounds like you kind of get an idea for like kind of what your murdery plot's going to be. And then that kind of from there, once you have that, then it's like, okay, I'm going to go through and this is the perfect opera to go to meld with that. Is that kind of how that works? Could you talk about your process of developing your stories a little bit?
Oh, of course. There are pantsers and there are planners, and I'm a planner. So I'm obsessive about planning out every detail of a plot in outline form before I start to write the book. So when I'm doing that, I'm thinking about the operas that I'm going to use as the core of the story and what kind of murders take place so that I can parallel the story to the opera stories. So that's my process. I think about And it's great pleasure because I love some of the operas I hate. Some of the operas are so disturbing that I can barely think about them. And most of them are just, they have certain things in common. It's like the little story I like to tell where a friend of mine was at a rehearsal where the soprano was singing her death scene and her 12-year-old son was waiting patiently in the back. So my friend asked him what he thought about his mother's death scene, and the kid replied, "It's opera. Everybody dies." This gives you a sense of it's not a problem. I think about how I want these murders to happen. I think about how they happen in the operas, and then I sit down and I just work out every little detail about the plot, which of course changes once I start writing. It all changes a great deal, but at least I have that blueprint. And within that, I'm thinking, okay, um, the Ride of the Valkyries here, and Romeo and Juliet's, suicide here, and all these kinds of things that go into my mind. And eventually, I just distill it down and pick which ones would go with what's going to happen at San Francisco Opera and what kind of chaos is going to be created. But within that chaos, there's something that's very meticulously planned and ordered. I usually take about 6 months to do an outline before I'll start actually writing the book. So once I start writing it, I've got all those operas in my mind. And when it's all done, I get to then go through again and choose which quotes from which operas I'm going to put in which chapters. So there's a lot of organization, but in the end, it ends up being, sure, a lot of work, but also a lot of fun because I just love opera so much.
Well, your love of it just really comes through in not only the way that you present the detail and the scenes to us, but also the characters that you build. And because Julia travels from city to city, we get to meet like a really cool new host of characters each time around. So I'm wondering, Erica, if you wouldn't mind just taking a few moments to kind of introduce our viewers to some of the new characters that are a part of the San Francisco Opera House and maybe how they fit into Julia's new world.
Well, of course, there's Julia and then her life partner, Larry, who is now a retired NYPD detective, and their daughter, Rebecca, who is a 5-year-old, basically a genius, who, by the way, is actually based on a real kid that I knew, who was every bit as brilliant in all of those ways. So, of course, we all need inspiration for our characters. So those characters are the core of the story. But then every opera house has a different orchestra, a different set of singers, a different set of stagehands, and everything that entails. So it's really a lot of fun to create these characters. But then there's always an antagonist, or maybe more than one. The antagonist at the beginning is this French stage director who's tremendously obnoxious. And he's even obnoxious to Julia, which is unusual because usually the orchestra musicians don't have anything to do with the stage directors. But as you will see, or the readers will see when they read the book, he manages to definitely get her all riled up in ways that don't make her job any easier. So there's the stage director. I'm happy to say that I was able to create an opera company that's basically run by women.
Nice.
The general director is a woman. The conductor is a woman. The personnel manager of the orchestra is a woman. And so I had great fun creating these. And the conductor was based on one of the most famous women conductors around right now. And so that was a fun part of it as well. Julia's colleagues in the orchestra, there's always somebody that's after her job, or, resents her in some way. And that's part of it goes with the territory of being concertmaster. So those are some of the main characters that we get to meet, starting pretty much at the beginning. And then it goes from there. And of course, there's the character from the previous book, Marin Crane, who is a soprano. And she's singing in the Ring in San Francisco. So she and Julia get to hang out together and talk about what's going on and deal with all the conflicts that are happening. So characters are fun. I remember when I first started writing when I was a kid, actually before I started playing the violin, I was in a creative writing program in school. And though I don't remember what I wrote, because it was 100 years ago, I remember that I always loved the process of creating characters and plot lines and weaving them all together to tell stories. And I still do. So characters, I think they're the most fun of all.
I agree. I love creating wacky, or I love doing, just characters that are not normal people that you would meet every day, but still have like relatable enough aspects that you're like, you know what, like I would love to hang out with them. Yeah, it's such a fun part of the craft of writing. And speaking of writing, Erica, because we only have a couple more minutes together in our moment today, what's next? What's on the horizon for you for future projects in the world of mystery or any other genre that you're interested in dabbling in?
That's a good question. I'm at the point where I need a bit of a break, and I think Julia needs a break as well. So she's told me. So I haven't thought for sure, although my publisher has brought up the idea, but I haven't decided whether I'm going to go for a next book with Rebecca becoming maybe a few years older and more mature and more wanting to dabble in what her mother does, or whether the suggestion also came up that I could write something about opera history and murders that have taken place in fictional operas and in real time in opera houses. It's happened over, I mean, opera has been here for 400 years, so there could be a lot happening there. So I haven't decided for sure what, but the prospects are quite exciting, although I have to admit that my characters are talking to me and they're like, what do you mean? We have to have another book, because we want to do this, this, and this, and we want to go to this opera house and play these operas. And I'm like, okay. I acknowledge you. I know that you're not going to stop talking to me, so we'll see what happens. Stay tuned is all I can say.
And how can folks,
Yes.
how can folks like stay connected and stay tuned? For like, how should they be following you, either online, newsletter, what have you? Where's ways that readers can stay connected so that they know what's next on the horizon?
Well, first and foremost is my website, ericaminer.com. And there is a link there that you can send me an email. You can also sign up for my newsletter, and you can see all about my books and various other things, the articles that I'm, on top of everything, I'm also a journalist writing concert and opera reviews. So all the articles are there. So you can reach me through my website. I'm also still on Facebook. I'm on there every day because I have a great network of people there who love opera and love to talk about it. So you can find me on Facebook and Instagram and the usual channels. And I always love to hear from people who are interested in my work, people who love opera, of course, people who love mysteries. And I always respond. So if you send me a message through my website, I will always respond. I'm, attached to email, like, in all my waking hours. So I love to hear from everybody.
Fabulous. And any in-person events or upcoming other appearances that folks might be able to either meet you at in person or online?
Well, those of you who are in the Seattle area, there's a library in Edmonds, which is north of Seattle. And I am going to be speaking there, presenting there next Wednesday, February the 12th at 1 o'clock in the afternoon about my journey and my non-traditional path from becoming an opera violinist to a writer of opera mysteries. And I'm going to have a PowerPoint presentation with that, with lots of nice images and history and all kinds of good stuff. So if anybody's in my area, that's where I'm going to be next.
Fabulous.
Awesome. That sounds so much fun. I wish I was in the Seattle area. So
I do too.
Well, I tell you what, Erica, this has just been fabulous. And I know I've said this before, but one of the things that's such a joy hanging out with you is, first off, you're absolutely delightful, of course. You write fabulous books, and it's so much fun and so fulfilling to hang out for a little bit and learn something, because obviously I've told folks I have zero opera background, and it's just such a bonus to have a chance to become immersed in something like mysteries that I love and learn something along the way. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And thank you for also inspiring us with the Golden Gate Bridge behind you, behind it, of the location for Overture to Murder. But I really appreciate it. I love it when people who don't know anything about opera read the books and say, I'm going to go see my first opera now because of the book. So that's always inspiring as well. And I wanted to thank you both for a delightful time, as always. And I feel very, very honored to be a part of your show.
Well, we are honored to have you here, Erica, and we are very much we're grateful for you sharing your time with us this afternoon. We're also very grateful for our wonderful viewers who shared their time with us this afternoon. We love being able to be bookish with you all, and we do have an episode of the Bookish Hour coming this Thursday, February 6th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Our special guests for the evening are myself and JC. We are going to have a time. It's been a while since we've been able to really sit down and chat about our work, about what we're up to. JC just had a fabulous book come out, Murder in the Under the Marquee.
Has some new covers that just came out.
So we've got some stuff to catch up on, you guys. So it'll be a fun episode where we get to be in the hot seat. So we hope that you'll be able to join us. So again, thank you to Erica Miner for sharing her time with us this afternoon. Thank you to our wonderful viewers. Until we see you all again, stay bookish. Bye, everybody. Have a good one.
Bye.